FlexMFG in MTO mode is for cases where the company sells a product that is sometimes configurable and can be different depending on the customer's requirements, or when the salesperson says, "What do you mean? It's exactly the same except for." In MTO mode, work orders are created in response to requirements entered in a sales order. Let's start by entering the inventory ID of one of our manufactured items that we commonly customize for a customer's order. Note that Acumatica, with the FlexMFG add-in installed, injects some new fields onto the sales order line. Notice the field dedicated WO. If the inventory item is defined as a manufactured item, then the checkbox in this field is enabled. If it is preset, or you manually check it, this indicates that a work order will be generated to produce the items on the sales order line. Let's go ahead and do that. Now we need to generate work orders for all the lines that we have indicated with the dedicated work order field checked. Generating the work orders is done by the item Generate Work Orders on the Action drop-down list. Now that a work order has been created for the sales order line, we have the option of modifying it to suit the customer's specific needs. I'll do that here just to show how flexible FlexMFG work orders are. Just before I do that, note the unit price for the item on the highlighted sales order line. Clicking on the hyperlink for the work order number opens the work order. Let's modify this work order to add a new component item, and change the quantity consumed for one of material components used in the finished product. Then let's add a new labor operation to the labor non-stock item. Changing the material and/or labor non-stock items will certainly change our cost and ultimately might affect our sales price. If I wish, I can review my costs and recalculate my sales price and update the unit price on the associated sales order line. This is handy for working up prices, but more on that later. Now back at the sales order, I'll refresh the record to see the price that was calculated by the work order, now on the sales order line. Now back at the sales order. I won't be able to create a shipment for the sales order line until the dedicated work order is complete. This ensures that the goods manufactured specifically for this order are available to be shipped. While we are at the sales order screen, let's also look at a couple of other useful features that FlexMFG adds to this form. For items on sales orders that the company can manufacture, FlexMFG makes available the ATP, or Available to Promise feature. I'll enter a sales order line for an item we manufacture, and show how the ATP feature works. Entering a sales quantity of 4, then reviewing the inventory status panel, I can see that 4 are on hand. Invoking the ATP feature confirms that I can promise an immediate delivery. However, if I change the quantity to 7, greater than the quantity that I have on hand, the ATP function returns a much different date that I can promise delivery on. ATP identified that I did not have enough units in stock to fulfill the order and it will be necessary to make more units. ATP has reviewed all the components, inventory, and operations necessary to manufacture the item, and has determined what is the critical constraint, and based on that, when we can promise delivery.
So that was a bit of a rundown on on how our bespoke order process works when you take it. Now I'm just going to jump into the system here and show how we will do a quotation as well, where it's not actually a firm order at this point. We'll just do a quotation. So we'll go in and I'll pull up a sales order. This is my development machine, so there's a lot of crap on here. It's a little slower than usual. I'll enter a customer. And I'll add an item. Enter quantity. Now, at this point, if I look at what my options are, I can see that I created a sales order, and that's actually not what I wanted to do. I actually wanted to create a quote. So I'm just going to delete that order, and I'm going to go in and I'm going to create this as a quote. So that was my mistake. I'm going to go in, I'm going to select my order type, which is going to be a quote for the customer. So I am going to select a quote. Add my item again. Quantity the customer would like. I'll save it. Now my actions are, I can't generate any work orders because as yet I haven't selected the dedicated work order item. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that item, which means that I'm not going to sell one of the 4 that I have on hand. I'm actually going to build this item specific for this customer. So it's going to be a bespoke product that I'm going to build for this customer. So I'll now generate the work order. And at this point, we're only a quotation. So if we go and we look at the work order that's generated right now, it is identifying itself, the demand type, as a quote. And so that's going to change how the allocations look on our system. If you have any experience, anybody experienced with Acumatica, or are you all new to Acumatica?
We all have experience.
Okay. All right. So what would happen is at this point, there won't be any allocation showing up because this is just a quote at this point. So what we can go through is, again, we can go through and I can change any of the items that I'd like. I can add an additional labor item if I like. And I can, a quantity is 40 minutes to do that. So I in some way have changed this. This order is now different than a normal one because the kit specification that we used in order to build this really functioned as a template in our system. You could build it exactly to the template, or you can go in and you can modify it as you like to suit your customer's needs. So with that being done, back at the sales order, what I can do now is I can actually copy the order. And what do I want to copy it to? I want to copy it now to a sales order. So if I don't want to recalculate my prices, so I'll go through and I'll do this. And we now have created a sales order. And that work order that we were working up, and it might be a very iterative thing you do, go back and forth to your customer and send your customer copies of the quotation from the work order system, and it may be quite different than it was, but that work order that you actually had attached in the quote has now followed this to the sales order process. And so this is going to drop right into the process that we saw in the earlier video of how we would finish it and fulfill it. Some other nice features that we can actually do is if we go out here and we go, if you're at all an engineer to order company, I think this would be one that I want. And I think it's quantity. No, it's not a manufactured good, my fault. Oh, hang on. I don't know this data set particularly well. This is a manufactured item. And what I'm going to do at this point, I'm actually going to attach a drawing here. So I'm actually going to browse. I'm going to go here to, I'll just find something that makes sense. And what would I like here? Huh. Let me just. Oh, here's a drawing that makes sense. We'll add this one here. And as that's done, this is a nice feature in an engineer to order environment we can do. So we can look at that drawing here, just a simple technical drawing that we have here. But when I actually go through and I actually go through now and I will generate the work order for that, it's nice that the documents that I capture when I took the order are now going to follow the order around. So that document is now following that work order around. Whatever I captured on that line is following it around. So that's nice. I also have the ability to enforce that we have to get customer sign-off on this particular product before we actually build it. So especially when you're dealing with artwork, we have some customers who deal with artwork. You have to get sign-off from the customer on that in order to proceed. So checking the customer approval button when you go to the work order will engage the system here, which says that you're going to require this, and you're going to have to acknowledge, the user is going to have to go in and acknowledge that they actually did receive acceptance from the customer. That might be attaching a file, which some sort of an email that came back from the customer to this document that says, yeah, it was accepted. But somebody is taking responsibility for saying that the customer accepted it. Some of the features that we have on work orders are, if we go to the work orders themselves now, and we look at the work orders, and I'll say, for instance, pull up the one that we just did. If I look at my labor, and is that what I wanted to do? No, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to go through and show you a few things in here. One of the things we can do is we have this thing called state, and this is planning. And we really consider four states of an order. The first one is planning, where you have an order in the system, and at this point in time, you're just looking at things. Now, we have another state in here that's called planned. And when you say planned, you're getting more serious about the order. And what you've done is you've actually gone through, in the planning stage, you're going through and you're saying, okay, I want to look at my inventory. And so I've looked at the inventory at this level, and I said, oh, I have product in stock to build this particular item. So I can look down here and I can see these items I do. Now, this particular item here is an item that we manufactured. It's telling me that because it's a manufactured subassembly. If I didn't have enough of that, I would have to produce it. So don't think it allows me to change this quantity here, does it? So I've gone to 40 now, and if I go to check my inventory, you'll notice that it now says that, oh, I don't have enough in inventory to suffice that, so I'm going to have to purchase some. So the system has already kind of gone out and looked at the availability of inventory in the system, and it's figuring out how I'm going to satisfy it. I'm either going to make it or sell it. If I make it, and then I actually complete my planning, what it will do is it will actually go out and it will actually create a work order for the subassembly. So there would be 2 work orders for the subassembly. So you can see that if you go back to the production order screen here, and we look at, here's a top-level production order to build one of our products, and you'll notice that it's generated this whole series of work orders. So work order number 52 is required by 51. 53 is required by 52. 54 is required by 50. 55 is by 50. So there's a hierarchy to all these work orders. These are all sub-assemblies. In this case, where I didn't have enough of the product in-house to build, and so the system is generating work orders for me to build those sub-assemblies in order to complete that. Going back here, there's some items that I have to purchase here as well. It's brought in my preferred vendor that I have on my inventory master at this point. Now I have the option. I can actually, I'll release that right here. Oh, there's security on this. I actually have the ability to purchase this if I am a user with rights to be able to purchase. I've logged in as administrator, and the security in this system is set up such that I'm not granted. I'm not an employee, and you have to be an employee and have to be granted the rights to purchase in order to purchase from this screen. But if I logged out and logged in again as a user with those rights, I'd be able to hit purchase requirements, and it would run out and it would purchase these requirements. What it will also do is I can also say purchase the chain requirements, which that will go out and that will look at all the POs starting from this PO and its sub-assemblies that it needs. It will look at those and it will aggregate all of the components that I buy by vendor. And then it will create a PO to the vendor, and it will then subsequently aggregate them all by items that I have on the vendor. So if I have 2 or 3 different sub-assemblies that each have a similar component, instead of having one line item for 3 and another line item for 5, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have one line item to that vendor for 8. So it will aggregate everything that way to the vendor. That's one way you can, in a job shop mode, purchase for the projects that you have ongoing. So I could do that, and I'll maybe if we have time, I'll flip in and I'll show you how that actually works. I also have the ability for non-stock items. If I may have a non-stock item which may be an operation that I get an outside vendor to perform for me. Say, for instance, I'm just guessing in your business, it might be something like embroidery. If you didn't do your embroidery in-house, and you might send a number of T-shirts of your product out to be embroidered, they might be hats, they might be T-shirts, but you have an outside vendor to do that. If you add the outside vendor, and you add, and what they're giving you is either a service or a non-stock item, you can actually select that. And then if we give ourselves a quantity here, we give ourselves a quantity here. If we go through, and there's no vendor here on this one, but if there's a vendor that I could pick, and of course I don't have the ability in this system with my security level to do that, I could then create a PO directly for this non-stock item. So in my world, in my manufacturing world where I grew up, we would often have operations. We built machinery. We would often have operations that we didn't do. They were specialized things like heat treating certain pieces of metal. Well, this is how I would handle that in this system. I would cut a PO right here from the system to do that. So it helps me track that. We've got, if we look in the system, we've got job costing at this point. It's keeping track of all our material costs and everything that we have here. We actually have actual costs. So when I go to an order that is completed, let me go to one that's completed here. Oh, there was one. Come back. So here's one here that's completed. I can actually see the job costing. So I can see here that, where am I here? Oh, there's a bug. Oh, that's something new I put in. That's a bug I wrote. But anyway, you'd see here that we actually have planned cost, actual costs, and it actually gives us a variance. So we're seeing here some material costs aren't coming in, and there may have been a problem. I'm actually going to go out and look at the actual underlying transaction that's out there. This is the actual financial transaction that happened when we actually built this. And I can see that, yeah, we had some financial costs that come through here. So something's wrong here, but generally, it's my development system, and stuff may have gone halfway before it decided to quit. But the concept here is you get these and you get the variance as well. We actually have the ability to do partial completions. If you are in a business where you take an order for 1,000, but the customer would like 100 right away for some particular reason, you can actually do a partial completion on a work order and do that. And then ultimately, you can partially complete everything up until the very last item, and then at that point in time, you have to complete the work order. So we have a couple of ways that you can actually complete a work order. So depending on how your business works. So if I look at a released item here, okay, if I put a quantity that I'm going to complete, so I'm going to say I wanted to do one, I produced one, and the day that I'm completing it is this day, and I'll save that. Now, I may want to go out and I may want to record the actual quantities that I consumed. And if I have quite a long bill of materials, that might be quite an arduous task. What I can do is I can actually go in and put the actual quantities that I consumed. So in this case, if I put 2, what I will do is I will record 2 on the underlying transaction that's going to do this. So I said I was going to use 1. But I actually use 2. This is what I actually call an overage. It's not actually where you're physically scrapping an item because of some defect or some message, some method in your manufacturing operation didn't work and the part was damaged and couldn't be reused. Now there is the option to scrap parts as well. You can say that I scrapped them. And then we have a separate scrap transaction for that, which basically takes the inventory and puts it in a separate location so that you can rework it, maybe something happens, maybe you send it back to the vendor, or there's a number of issues you can do with it. But we're considering 2 things, overages and scrap. And so those are basically come in on our costing as well. But if I don't want to do that, if it's a long time, I can just go like this, and what it'll do is it'll actually go down and it'll fill in all these blanks for me. So I click this, and anything that is 0 or that I have not specifically set, it will go in and it'll say, okay, we're going to use what we thought according to plan. So we had 50 items on this bill of materials. 1 we used more than we thought we were going to do. I entered that in the system, and then I clicked this button, and then it basically updated everything to the quantity required, which is this quantity here. Or I have another option. I can actually go in and I can actually quick complete the order. So if I go in and I quick complete, I don't enter anything, I just open the order and I click quick complete. What it will do is it will what we call standard backflushing. It basically looks at the bill of materials and said, okay, everything went according to plan. We consumed the quantity of items and the amount of labor that we expected to consume, and it will just backflush those at whatever you have on your bill of materials. So everything will be there. So that's another quick way you can do that particular thing. If you have a highly repetitive order that works like that, we also have the ability to do order processing. You can process a large group of orders all at once. And one of the things we can do, we have some customers that take literally hundreds of orders a day. Well, you can run through some of the steps that we've shown, automatically complete planning. Just assume that you're going to complete planning. Release it, which is going to turn it over to the system. Print the production orders, which are going to send the production orders to the workshop. schedule all the labor. When you start using scheduling, you can schedule all the labor or check all the inventory just to see where we are from inventories. So if I just go through and I just say release, and I then pick a warehouse that I'm going to release all the work orders for, I've got these work orders that are ready to be released. Only a planned work order can be released. And now if I collect these, I can just process these and release them all. So that would be a way that I can set up automation to do a lot of these tasks that are in the manufacturing system. One of the things that I might want to do is I might want to look at my production requirements. I indicated that you could basically order from a top level work order all of the components you have to completely do the product, or you can just order for a work order by work order basis. But what I may want to do is I may again be another vendor that has an awful lot of things. Maybe in your world you have 50 orders for T-shirts, and now what I want to do is I want to aggregate, white cotton crew neck T-shirts. I want to know across a whole bunch of orders how many of those I have compared to my inventory and how many I might have to purchase. So what we can do is there's a screen for that. I can go in and I can actually pick a date range if I want. If I only want to work on orders that I'm going to be dealing with for the next 2 months, that's basically picking a month from now, from the beginning of time. I can go through and I can say, okay, give me a particular item, and now I can go through and say, okay, across all these orders, tell me what I need. Aggregate all of the demand, all of maybe the different size T-shirts, and add them up. So I'll just go through and pick a few here for us so we can see what the report does. And now if I click this, it will basically process all of these orders. It will generate POs for all of the items that I don't have. But before I do that, or maybe purchasing agents don't want to actually go that far to automatically generate the POs because they've got a negotiation process or something, we have an interim report that you can do. And you could basically hand this to a purchasing agent. They might buy directly from this report, or they might just use it as a preliminary way to inspect what's going to be bought out there. But if we look out here, it basically shows the work order, the demand, and it shows me that in this case, I have a purchase recommendation of one of these particular items. So I can see here, there's another way I can actually run the report where I only want to see actual requirements, actual things that I have to buy. The rest of the goods have been sourced in the system. There was inventory available. And so if I look at this, the report will get much shorter, I think. And it just tells me just the items that I have to buy. So I have to buy one of those, two of those, one of those, one of those. And of course, these are small numbers because these are complex medical devices. The numbers would probably be much larger where you're taking higher numbers of orders. So just excuse me for a sec. I'm just going to, Jim, you want to jump in for a sec? I just have to take a cough candy here before I talk.
Sure, will do. Thank you, Greg. So just take this moment. Any questions, or are we covering the items that you wanted to cover? Perhaps we should have asked that 15 minutes ago. John, so far so good?
So far from here, yeah. John?
Yeah,
Right.
no question.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. There's a lot of abbreviations. I think we'll need an index book, possibly several pages long, to figure out what a WO, a WCI, and an OITO is. But I'm sure we'll get used to the abbreviations and the acronyms.
Yeah. Right. And then, but we'll go through it. I'll ask Greg what we have, and then you'd also mentioned that you had some questions about replenishment. So when we get to that point, we'll show you some other things.
Right. Let's spend a moment about replenishment and just look at it. If we take a particular order here and we go in, often in my world, I used to kind of work in production at one point in time. Oops. Is that a set? What have I got? I've got the sales order. That's not what I wanted. I actually wanted the... Oh, that is the production order. if I click on an item here, it tells me down here what I have on hand, what I have available, what I have in purchasing, what I have in receipts, the demand that I have in production. So I have 1,076 in production, and it doesn't include this order. So just if I want to at a high level, just see where we look, I can go like this. And this is the same information that the check inventory function is using. It's going through, and in this particular case, it's showing me that I have a negative amount available, and I'm going to have to purchase it. I can look at that more closely if I look at the allocations themselves directly. And if you've had any experience with looking at the allocations, you can see, you'll notice that we've actually injected some new allocations in there, and we call these production supply, production demand, and production allocated. So just a moment to talk about these items here.
Right. And excuse me, Greg, but so this is right out of Acumatica in terms of what on hand is as it relates to the entire supply chain. So you start off with items that are on order, items that are in transit, items that are in the warehouse, etc. And then we've augmented this standard Acumatica feature to include things like what's in planning or what's planned in the life of the work order that's part of the FlexMFG product. But the idea is to give you a complete rundown of what's in stock or what needs to be in stock so that you can manufacture, whether or not, quote unquote, you can rob Peter to pay Paul, etc. And again, how we integrate with Acumatica. Acumatica has itself replenishment logic. So let's say that you have parts that always go into all your products and you know you use 100 a month. So you can set up Acumatica to automatically replenish stock with your vendor 100 a month. Well, that 100 would be reflected in this mathematical logic. So we not only have our material requirements planning tools, but we can complement Acumatica's replenishment tools. So as you start to use our product and get to know the flow of your components that go into your finished goods, you can augment the tools that we have with the out-of-the-box tools that Acumatica have so that you can, as best as possible, not run out of stuff to make delivery, right? Which is in the end, which is what this is all about. So thank you, Greg, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so on the deduction side, we really have additions and deductions. That's pretty straightforward. If we make something, it's going to show up here in production supply. If we're thinking about making something, it's going to show up here. And of course, you can set up your allocation rules to say, yeah, I want visibility of that number, or I don't want visibility of that number. Over on this side, we've got 3 items, and one item here is particularly interesting. That's production allocated. What that does is production demand prepared is a soft allocation. Production demand is a soft allocation. Production allocated is a hard allocation, which means that number is going to directly be allocated. It's not going to be available for anything else. It's like you've actually moved it out of the system. So when you, this is an older, this is a little older version. In our latest version on 21R2, there is a function here where you can say allocate inventory. And so what you're going to go through is you're going to go through in this inventory that you think you're going to have, the fulfill method is going to change to allocated. It'll say, yeah, it's hard allocated. Nobody else can grab that inventory. So if you absolutely you're trying to make some deadline for a very important customer, and not everybody in the whole organization knows the status of inventory, you can actually hard allocate inventory so that it's not available. So that's actually a feature inspired by a customer of ours that we're working on for our next release. So that's how the numbers get in the system. and how we use them. And those numbers are actually numbers that we use in our production requirements. And so we're going through and we're, as again, I showed you that report. This would be a little longer, and then I can run the report. And it's going to run through. This is actually going to be quite a long report, this one, but it'll go through, and it hopefully won't take too long or blow up. And it hasn't done either. So we're out here, and we actually have, I'm not sure how many pages we have. Do I have a page number on here? I don't. But there's quite a bit. But we can see that I have a purchase requirement for 3,150 of these particular items, and this is where the demand came from. And we can see that I actually haven't allocated any inventory here, so you're not seeing the reserve number here. One of the things that we do is we had one final method on our production orders. And if I go to a release production order, Jim had talked about how we supercharge the kitting function. And what we do is, if you have serialized inventory or lot controlled inventory, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to select lots and serial numbers for the items that you consume, and you may have to potentially assign lots and serial numbers to finished items. And so this data set that we use is highly serialized. You can see that many of these items are lot and serialized, so they're actually indicated right here. And we're actually going out and saying that we do not have the required amount of this lot allocated for this particular item. That's really telling me that I haven't selected the lot that I'm going to consume for this. And so I do that on the kit assembly itself. And here we are, we're back looking at Acumatica's standard kit assembly. And we're looking at that right here, and we can see that it's lot controlled. And now at this point, what I have to do with this document is I'm going to have to go out and I'm going to have to select the lot of product that I'm going to be using here. And so I would go in here and select it. And likewise, this tells me that my finished product is serialized. Likewise, I'm going to have to go out and I'm going to have to generate 4 serial numbers for the finished product that I'm going to do. When that is done, and I go back to the work order, these messages will go away, and at that point in time, I will be able to either quick complete or complete the order. I'll be able to do that. So there's number of, one last thing is everybody always wants to see what a printed work order looks like. And of course, you have the complete ability to do that. You can actually print your production order here if you want. And the idea is that this is your traveler out in the shop. Now, your workers may actually record time here. So I may have a pretty big staff out there that's actually recording time. Well, what I don't want to do with Acumatica licensing is give each of these users a user ID to log in the system to record their time. So what we have is we actually have a time capture system. You actually go in, you can select a work order that we have, and then you're given an access code, and that's an encrypted code. Did it find me?
And this is, with Acumatica, you have unlimited user licensing, but you also have some license types that are user-based. The smaller version is all user-based, and then there's options for user-based licensing. If you go that route, then you might have a problem if you got 30 people on the floor and you want them to individually enter time. This allows you to do that without having to worry about the license, is the point.
Right. So just quickly to show you how that works.
And then, Greg, I need 1 minute. But if you
I've got one more thing to show you after this.
I know, and I just wanted to, if you don't mind, could you also just reinforce the fact that Acumatica's, the basic monitoring and automation and dashboarding of Acumatica is all incorporated.
Yeah.
So you can schedule work order generations. You can show open work orders on a dashboard palette. You can do those types of things, like right here, right? So all of these are user definable. On the work order screen, you can have a side panel. All of those automation tools that come with Acumatica fully complement FlexMFG. And so people like that, right? And, you know, obviously those are defined by the user. We give you a couple, and you can see the ones we give you here, like production orders overdue. So when you have your daily scheduling meeting, okay, am I going to make a shipment this month or not, right? Well, this will help you, right? That type of stuff. So,
right. One last item I wanted to touch on, which was scheduling. And so if we go into light manufacturing and we pull up a production order again, and we pull up a work order that's here, and we go to our labor non-stock, you'll notice that here we actually have an operation start time and a stop time that's gone out and calculated. We have the ability to schedule labor. And what's going to happen, you're going to notice that these operations here are now scheduled to start on 12:15. And they're basically going to end on 12:15 because they're only a few minutes each. However, why are they starting on 12:15? Well, they're starting on 12:15 because if I go out here, I have a constraint right here. It's going to take 28 days for me to get this particular item from the vendor. And I haven't even purchased this item yet. So it's going to start, the clock starts ticking from now. If I purchase the item and I have a delivery date from my vendor in there, then this particular item will start. Now you can see this is sort of done by the system, but it's really not particularly conducive to being interactive with a user. So there's another screen that's going to be introduced in the scheduling, and it's going to be a screen that's going to be like this. I have my resources down here. I have the tasks that they're doing here, and you can see this is my utilization here. So you can see that in this point in time, I have John overutilized. So if I move some of these things around, you will notice that what I'm doing is, in this case here, if you look for Mike, which is about fifth from the bottom, you'll notice as I move this, what I'm doing is I'm now beginning to balance out my work because I have a constraint of only having 8 hours a day, but when I had that particular item moved around, I'm doing that. So what will happen is you'll basically move stuff around in your operation like this to get everything organized the way you'd like it, and then you'll commit this back to the system. And when you commit that back to the system, it's going to update these particular times, which it just happens to be where they're stored. But that will be how you'll be able to do the scheduling. So the idea is we'll be able to get you close just by doing a overview here. But the fine adjustments that you're going to have to do, really in the scheduling board. Now, we are going to have the ability, if you've got a hard date and you want to lock your material availability to some hard date, you'll be able to do that. And we actually have a dependency. If one operation is dependent upon another operation being finished, then it won't start till another. So say, for instance, you've got fab, so I've got welding and everything. Well, I can hardly say that painting is going to happen concurrently with welding. So what would happen is that painting would have a dependency on welding the welding operation being completed before it goes. So not very strict routing like you'll see in many different manufacturing packages where you have to basically assign a sequence that everything's going to happen, and that doesn't really work in a job shop or in a very dynamic environment. But what we can do is we can put that dependency in there, and you will be able to define those on the kit specification when you go. We'll add those fields that will say that, yeah, generally when we're building this, and here's our template, generally painting is going to come after fabrication. So that might be one case where you do that. So I'm
our
sure
overall,
missed
our
some
overall,
stuff, but
yeah, well, just two things. Our overall plan here is, we focus on the day in the life. So the sales guy comes in and says, hey, our most important customer wants this product, but they need it by the end of the month. Can we ship it? Or you're in the scheduling meeting on a Wednesday and accounting comes in and says, hey, we'd like to get out X amount of dollars this month. Are we in a situation where we can produce this many orders? Can we make this date and make our goal for $200,000, $500,000, whatever the number is for shipments this month or this quarter? And so interactively, you go back and forth between these tools that manage material and manage scheduling to give the individual somewhat easy to use tools to augment the human mind to answer those fundamental questions. The last thing we'll show you, and you mentioned, Greg, if you could click the forecasting and planning. So we have a production planning tool. And what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go ahead, Greg, if you want to. I've got a little video too, either way.
yeah,
But,
maybe the video works better. You've got
right.
that
I'm just going to. So let me share my screen, and let's see here. Yeah. So. So we have the ability to bring in the historical demand, in this case from the item ending in 121. And we can apply either linear regression or moving average to that historical usage and forecast into a period that could be a month, it could be a quarter, it could be a year, it could be a week, given what we've done in history, how we've bumped history up 10%, 15%. We're going to have a show in March, and we anticipate a 20% bump, in April, May, and June as a result of that show. And therefore, given that, what do we anticipate our demand will be in the future? And the system will go out, take those data points, apply the statistics, and then give you what the demand is going to be. So therefore, you can allocate your replenishment accordingly. So here the idea is, okay, you've got your annual meeting, and okay, what are you going to sell sales? Well, I'm going to sell this, that, and the other thing, and I'm going to bump it up 10%. Go run the numbers, run our material requirements planning tools, and based on that forecast, come up that says, okay, to make this, we're going to have to go buy $3,250,000 worth of material to meet this forecasted demand in the future. And then give that to the boss, and he or she can go to the bank and do whatever they need to do to ensure that the monies are available to purchase that material for this demand. So once again, there's a manual thing in here too. I haven't run this for a while, so anyway, you've got a manual adjustment too. If you want, there it is. There's the manual adjustment. So you can go in there and say, yeah, I don't think that that forecast is exactly right, because, like as an example, I had that event, and that wasn't reflective of historical experience. So this new show is going to bump up sales 20%. Therefore, I go in there and I adjust manually the outcome of the statistical model. So that's another way that we can augment replenishment. And I know from working with your team and Iqbal that was one of the requirements that you had.